nothing very formal, just a general chat. And I also want to have a bit more time for questions, just in case anyone has any, not just general questions, but like deeper questions on how they can do stuff, or ideas they have, or things like that. Just so yeah. So basically, I will be talking about the. Sorry, one thing, guys. Please let me know. Would you prefer video or not? Would that be yes or
So
no?
please, please in the comment section if you'd like to have a video
A video or
or
not?
not.
Yeah. Because just in case, I don't want to scare anybody. So so um, I don't mind. Okay, someone is typing, and hopefully they'll say no afterwards. Okay, cool. That's cool then. That makes sense. I'll go with the first one. Okay, cool. So the first thing we'll talk about, we'll just talk about me, a bit of my experience, and myself in general. I'm from Anambra State. Anambra State. I was born and I grew up in Port Harcourt, Nigeria. I went to FGC Port Harcourt, and then I left and I came to the UK in 2000. So I've been here for about, well, 19 years. I've been in the UK for about 19 years now. Hence my accent. Well, it's not a British accent, but it's a twisted Nigerian accent basically. I studied at Brunel, electrical and electronics engineering. I graduated in 2005, and basically I've been working in technology for over 12 years. So this is from being a tester to a data analyst, and then being a developer. Um, I've been a developer for over 9 years, and my specialty was basically, I started off with being a C# developer, um, .NET, and then a full stack developer using things like Angular, React, with C# anyway in the back end, and then now I've kind of moved towards like a Node.js, so I'm more TypeScript, Node.js, JavaScript, and quite a lot of AWS, um, which is quite strange. I didn't actually see myself going that way. Um, I've worked for quite a few clients. I'm currently working on a contract basis anyway, with British Gas and Centrica, working on a massive scale project. That has been going on for about a year and a half now, and I think I have another year and a half to go with that one. Um, and yeah, I also run my own consultancy, where I help small businesses build apps here and there for little businesses, and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and then apart from that, all the boring stuff. Now the exciting stuff is like I enjoy photography, traveling. I enjoy the consultancy work because I think it's great. I love mentoring young people, and well, special thing, I love playing Xbox because I love all my games and all that stuff. And importantly, I'm married. I've got two kids. I've got a wife and two great kids. Yeah. So enough about me. Um, so basically, the content, what we're going to be talking about, will be initially talking about cloud computing. I'm just a very brief introduction to it, and then we'll be talking about the assumptions. So I'm going through this, through the slides, and basically there's assumptions that are made about you guys, and I'm hoping that I'm right in some cases. And then we're going to go through building a web application. Now this is very quick, and so this is not it's not showing you how to code or anything. It's just basically this is basically an application. That's it, right? And then we'll talk about deploying the simplest way of deploying a web application. So it could be a website, it could be a web app, but like a basic website, web app or website. And then we're going to look at some other ways of hosting the web application. And then we'll look at some tips. So some do's and don'ts and summary. And then we're going to have questions. So now that we've gone through all this stuff, Some people could be like that and probably thinking, I probably know all this stuff, so hey, I don't actually need to be here, or I could just fall asleep. Well, I hope you don't fall into those shoes. Other people could be there, so you get to a point where you think, darn, I'm scared, man. Like, oh, what in the world is all this? Well, that's another thing. But I hope you're not in the shoes, and I hope that everyone is here. So let's get down to business, basically. So, what is cloud computing? Cloud computing, I'm sure we've all heard about it in general. So basically the practice of using a network of remote servers hosted on the internet to store, manage, and process data. So instead of, because depending on how long you've actually been in technology, you know that in the past, it was more of people running things locally, hosting things locally, like databases and servers and all that kind of stuff. So basically everything now is moving, or the future is basically cloud, and people are moving towards the cloud. Advantages of cloud computing, you're looking at the cost. Well, that is kind of like with a little bit of a question mark. It depends on how you manage it, but yes, the cost. So the cost on, like, you don't need people to manage servers. You don't need all that infrastructure team and all that kind of stuff. You've basically got people with knowledge who can develop and host stuff and secure stuff for you. You don't need like a massive team of people, basically. Hence the cost. Scalability. So basically, it's easier to manage between one user and 1,000 users in the click of a button. So it is very, very scalable. Business continuity. So it's kind of fail safe, or it helps with failure. So it's easier to recover from a failure when you're using cloud anyway. Security, yes and no. So security it's an advantage, because then you don't have to physically manage the security of your servers and all, but you at least you leave a little bit for the providers to do, but then you still have to do a lot of it, and we'll talk about that in a bit more detail later on. Easily manageable, yeah, it is. It is easier, but the learning curve in some cases is quite steep. Disadvantages. So I just picked a few. There's a lot more. So disadvantages, the cost. Now this is a different cost. Now the cost could be the running the services, hosting a database, and all that kind of stuff. Some people may want more. Some people may want less, and you could end up, well, depending on how big your applications are and what you're using, you can end up with a bill of 3-4 grand a month, and that's pounds. so yeah, it all depends on what you're doing with it. Limited control and flexibility. So as an old schoolish developer, I like having control of stuff, and it frustrates me sometimes when I don't actually have control. Hence, they take away the control from you, but I do like having that control. So I see that as a bit of a disadvantage. Just in case things happen, I like to know where things happen. I just hate magic. So I hate the whole thing of, you put this in, you get this out, and wow, things are done. But I prefer knowing how things work inside of it. So we have some providers, and I'm sure you guys probably know the major players anyway. These are basically like the major players. You have AWS or Amazon Web Services. You have Azure, Microsoft Azure. You have GCP, which is the Google Cloud Platform, which is kind of like more of the newest big player on the block in terms of like from the top three anyway. Heroku. Heroku, these are like the smaller guys, but they're still very good. Digital Ocean is also very good, very good too. So yeah, so basically this is just a general gist of it. It is very straightforward, and it's kind of the future, and people are moving that way. I think the only people that struggle to move that way is more like the finance or banking industry. I think reason why is because of security. So you don't want to host like databases with your client information on an external server or something like that, or an external database, and so on and so forth. So the reasons behind all that. So we'll moving on. Some assumptions that are made for this. Well, technically, these slides were meant to it was meant to flash for each point, but the way the setup is here, for some reason it's not flashing, but that's okay. It's just displaying everything. I'm assuming that you guys have a general programming knowledge. So it could be anything: C Sharp, C++, Java, JavaScript, anything, Python, anything at all. You know how to build an application in at least one programming language, which is basically about the same thing that I said. You are heard of, or you have a fairly good knowledge of cloud computing. So you've heard of AWS, for example. You know some of the services they provide and all that kind of stuff. But just general, you don't have to know it in depth, but just a general knowledge. Well, now my assumption, AWS is the way and nothing but the way. Now, I'm not promoting. I'm not promoting them. I don't have shares. I wish I had shares anyway, but I don't have shares with them or anything. I'm not promoting them. They're not the only the other guys are really good too. It's just that I have a lot more experience with AWS, and so I thought I would I would talk about it and choose it instead of the other ones. So for my code itself, for my application, I'm using VS Code or Visual Studio Code to build it. So I'm using VS Code. It's kind of an, well, depending on what they call it. Some people call it an IDE. Some people call it like a source code editor. Depends on you. So I'm using VS Code for that, and the front end from application, I'm using Vue.js. Not sure how many people are familiar with Vue.js. I am using Vue.js, and then the last bit is that I'm making this as my example here is as simple as possible. There is no security, no security risks, nothing. It's just as simple as it gets, and that's basically it. Okay, cool. So we will take on the first one. So I thought the best way that people could actually understand is if we have a problem to solve, and basically how we can solve the problem. So the first thing I did was to okay. So the first thing I did was actually a problem. And the good thing about that is that this is actually a real life problem. So this happened about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago. A friend of mine who runs a charity, he came to me and he said, "Oh, you know what? He's trying to do some stuff with some with some of his volunteers, and he basically wanted kind of like to create a little bit of a form where they can enter their shifts and all that kind of stuff. Because basically there were 3 shifts across the day, and so he wanted to ensure everything was covered. But then it was proving quite difficult because people were in different places and all that kind of stuff. So he couldn't actually bring them together, and he struggled to get that information from them. So we had a quick discussion, maybe about 2 hours or something like that, and I came up with a solution and said, okay, you know what? Because there's technically no security risk to say like that. You owe you just information. What I thought was that let's just have basically two a simple web page with two pages. So it was meant to be an SPA, so a single page application with 2 views basically. The first view is for one of the users is for the staff or the volunteers to enter their availability, and then this second one is for the management to actually see, kind of like a calendar view, and see who's available when and all that kind of stuff, and they can plan and manage from there. So it is basically, and that's all the wording here. It's basically that. Basically, so I came up with that solution, and it took me about a day or two to actually build this and to host it, to show you how simple it is anyway. And I'm not the best developer out there. I'm basically I'm good at what I do, but I'm not the best out there. So yeah, that's basically the problem and the solution that we came up with. So in terms of, not sure if you can see that very well. Anyway, can you guys see it very well? Like the black screen. Kind of blur. Okay. Okay, that's cool. I mean, sorry, because when I work normally, I tend to work with a dark screen because my eyes, for some reason, works a lot better with them. I think I'm just getting old, so I tend to try to use a dark screen. But nope, nope. Okay, blur over here too. Okay, so no one can actually see it. Okay, so basically, it's just that's just my a screenshot of my ID of VS Code, and basically on the side is on the side you have the file structure, and in the on the big window there on the tab you have a view called enter availability, and so basically the volunteers will actually enter the availability in that window. And basically, I just built it using Vue.js. So it's very simple HTML. Just it's basically just a table like table with three checkboxes repeated over like a period of 3 months or something like that. And that's basically, and then a button to submit. That's basically it. Um, so it is very simple. I just wanted to show you a quick view of how it looked actually. Okay, not moving. Okay, so hope that one is better because I think that one is probably a bit more important. Cool. Okay, so in terms of the application, I basically what I'm just doing is just going through a quick way to build the application. Now I'm using Node.js. With type. No, sorry, I'm just using Node.js. Sorry, not Node.js. What am I saying? Sorry, I'm using Vue.js. And it's with JavaScript, not TypeScript. I'm using Yarn instead of npm. So for those who are not very familiar with that, it's just a package manager. So it's like if you're a .NET user, you probably be used to npm, which is the NuGet packet manager. But this is this is one for Node. So basically, I'm just looking at the setup and the build. So you've written everything, you're happy with it, and all. Basically, you need to install your dependency packages, which is the screen below, and also in Node, you have a package.json file where you configure all your scripts. So for example, if you want to run a build, if you can see that I've got a serve, which means basically run. I've got a build, which is basically just build it and create like a distribution folder or dist folder and drop it into wherever I choose. You have a lint. Lint is kind of like for those who don't know, lint is kind of like I'm not sure if you know about ReSharper, so it's kind of like a tool that helps you to write your code nicely, I guess, or a standard of coding basically. That's basically what it does. And so you can have like a group of developers with the same rules, and what it is that it forces you to write your code in a certain way. So that's just lint, and then you have the end-to-end test and the unit test in there, and that's plain and simple. A yarn install on npm install, what it does is that it just gets all the packages. So for example, for a package, if I need to use a request, or if I need to use say if I need to install the AWS SDK, all I need to do for npm, it will be npm install AWS-SDK. If it's yarn, it's yarn add AWS-SDK, and that basically would install the package and write it to your Node.js, so to your package.json file, and you can delete the node modules file created, and to install it again, you just need to run npm install, and that's it. So basically, npm install is just the bit there, the bottom shot there. As you can see, it just installs the packages, all the view stuff, and so on and so forth. So it is quite straightforward. And then we want to build it now. So because I've created a script to actually build it, it's actually very simple building it. And building it is just basically you just running it's basically just running the basically in this case it'll be yarn build or yarn run build, whichever way. npm is just npm run build, npm build, and that would just run and build it and tell you if it's passed or failed. So very, very, very simple. And then well, voila, yeah, that's it. So you built your application. This is my file structure. Once you build your application, it creates a distribution folder, which contains basically all your manifest files, your images, your assets, your CSS, your JavaScript, all that stuff, which is basically this one here that I'm showing you. It's just to confirm that it's built and the files look okay, all that kind of stuff. Everything's in place, the structure is in place, and also and make sure you need to have the index.html file. If not, it's not going to work. So yeah, you just need to make sure it's there. Okay, cool. So now this is the key.
A seasoned consultant working with AWS in the UK. He has been in and around the tech sector for very long now, and then he has experience implementing financial software in related industries. And so he's going to be taking us on how to develop software for regulated industries today. And then it's going to be a very, very interactive and engaging webinar, and I hope you really enjoy it. Before we start though, I would like to let everyone know that if you have questions, you can just type in on the chat box. You should be seeing it on the right side of your screen. And then by the end of the presentation, I would go through all the questions, and then John can go ahead and answer all of the questions. All right. So now we're going over to John, and John, let's take this away.
Good afternoon. I hope you can hear me clearly. If you can't, just let the moderator know through the chat, and
Okay.
we can sort that out. Okay, I'm too close to the mic. Any better? Does it sound okay? Any issues, let me know. Okay, so good afternoon, and welcome to this session titled FinTech Regulation: How to Develop Software for Regulated Industries. I hope you've had a productive week so far, or at least a productive day. It's really an honor to be able to speak to like-minded people, and hopefully we can both gain some insights into how to make a difference using technology. Right, so what is my aim today? The main aim of this is to have a shift in your mindset. I'm not here to teach you how to program. I'm not here to teach you how to implement software. It's really shifting your mindset when it comes to developing software, because a lot of people just code, which is good. As programmers, we get excited. We just want to write stuff that solves problems. But sometimes, and what I've realized in the length of my career, is that we spend a lot of time firefighting, which I don't really think is is the best way to do things. So hopefully I can change some mindsets here today, and then my job will be done, especially when it comes to regulation. So before I do that, I think it's always good to know who you're talking to. So I'm going to introduce myself a bit. On the slide, it says I am a software solutions engineer. That's just a fancy way of saying I deliver software. I deliver software for clients in the financial services. I've been doing it for almost 15 years now. And if you're anything like me, you're probably now, this is the point where you try and work out my age. 15 years of experience. Focus on the webinar for now. Maybe someone can try and guess my age and put it in the chat, and then whoever gets it spot on will get a round of applause. However we can do that over a webinar. Anyway, 15 years. To me, it feels like a long time. Half of that time I've spent in the regulatory space. So about 8 years. And like I said earlier on, what I've realized is I spent a lot of those years firefighting. People write software, and then regulation comes in, and then we're firefighting, trying to fix issues, or trying to align it to deal with regulatory issues. And it costs people so much money and so much time. And the hope is that after this, when some of you leave here, if you work in the financial services or any regulated industry, when you start to write a piece of code, you start to think of the regulatory side of things as well. To be honest, the main skills, I'd like to say I'm a Microsoft stack person. So anything .NET related excites me. So Microsoft Service Bus for pub sub messaging, SQL Server, Web API stuff. But generally, I'm open-minded to any new technologies, because that's what I do. And so any sort of new technology excites me, and IT is quite exciting at the moment. Right, so you can see a lot of names with 2, 3, 4 on it. That's literally all the sort of regulatory projects that I've worked on in the past 7 years. So Solvency II wasn't in the insurance industry. Basically, the government says, well, if you're going to take all these all these insurance policies, if you bust, can you pay? Or if you have X amount of claims, you have sufficient funds to actually mitigate this risk? So all the insurance companies say, oh, well, we need to develop software to see if we're solvent or not. And then CAD 2, CAD 3, Basel 3, Basel 4, different regulations. They come up with, it's like they come up with it randomly once every 6 months. They come up with a new regulation that people need to do. And so banks and insurance companies or regulated companies keep chasing to meet these requirements. So that's what I've done for the last sort of 7 years. And because of the pain that I've been through in that time, I really would hope that the next sort of, well, at least the near future, when people develop software, they think about their regulation before they start. Okay, so straight into the subject. RegTech, how do you define, or what does RegTech mean? Well, really, it's just formed of a combination of 2 words, which is regulatory technology, and it's how we use innovation to solve regulatory problems. And it's relatively new within financial services. well, the term is relatively new within financial services, because RegTech has actually been around for a long time. Now, it's been around for a long time, but with all these traditional banks and the old sort of systems that they used in the past, they've struggled to come up with solutions to deal with their regulatory requirements. And so what's happened now is with the advent of new technologies, and you've got really smart people out there, and a lot of technology is a lot cheaper. RegTech has sprung up from nowhere, and is sort of taken over. And what it's doing is it's solving a lot of issues that the banks couldn't solve, or the banks had taken a long time to solve. So it's making quite a huge, a significant difference in the financial services industry. So in summary, really, it's just a new buzzword, but it's taking shape, and it's quite an exciting time. As I'm changing the slides, I hope you can see that I'm changing those slides. If not, let me know on the chat. Okay, so RegTech really focuses on three main parts of financial services, and those three are regulatory reporting, transaction monitoring, and compliance. Now, with regulatory reporting, you saw all the CAD 2, Solvency 2, Basel 3 things that I listed there. Basically, these are reports that financial services organizations need to provide to the regulator to say we're still solvent, or to say that they are doing things in the right way. And so they invest a lot of money in regulatory reporting, because if they don't meet certain deadlines to deliver these things, they get huge fines. Transaction monitoring. Now, the emphasis behind that is we need to know why people are spending money and what they're spending it on, or why money is coming into the economy and what it's being used for, because ultimately people have found ways to use the financial services industry to clean up the funds that they've realized from doing things that they shouldn't be doing. And so ultimately, the only way that you can stop these things is by monitoring the transaction, and hopefully in a smart way detect when someone is doing something they shouldn't be doing, whether it be fraudulent, whether it be terrorist financing, or drug trafficking. So that's a really huge part of RegTech. And then compliance. So, a financial services company might be, I've got a chat here, let me just check. Background noise. Okay. I don't have background noise here, so I don't think that's coming from me. If anyone, maybe someone needs to mute. An itchy sound, right? Okay, could be my mic. Is that any better? Have we still got the itchy sound? Right, okay. Thanks. Right, so compliance. So, okay, we do a lot of reporting on all these regulation, but are you actually compliant? So if your organization goes down today, or are you able to support all the sort of transactions that your organization is doing? Is what happened in the financial crisis in 2008, was that Lehman Brothers didn't have enough capital to support the trade that it was doing, and so when it went down, it affected the financial services industry. And so in order to avoid that happening again, we need to make sure that all these banks and all these financial services companies are compliant. So I think, as you can see, it's generally basically just trying to ensure that financial services organizations are doing the things that they're supposed to do and they're doing the right thing so that everything that does not affect the layman on the street. Okay, so how is RegTech grown? What we found is that in the fintech space, the regulatory bodies have not had a stronghold on startups or fintechs since the financial crisis of 2008, because what they wanted to do was foster the growth of innovation and allow people to use new technologies to make a difference. And so a lot of people are doing a lot of very fancy things and very interesting stuff. But everyone needs to be regulated because at some point somebody starts to use technology for the wrong thing. And so for this reason, there's been, a need or a call by regulators to say, okay, well, we've got all these great apps doing great things now. We need to be able to regulate them. And so there's been a growth in companies saying, okay, or people saying, well, I'm going to start regulating this sector by writing software using all these new and funky innovation that's in the market. Now, the reason it's been grown as well is in the traditional model or in traditional banks, they all try to do all the regulation at once. So, for instance, a bank has to do its KYC, which is know your customer, anti-money laundering. They also have to do all the regulatory compliance, which is their CAD2s, their Solvent 2s, and fundamental reviews of their trading book. Now, what RegTechs are doing is they're picking one of these areas or a subsection of that area and focusing on that area. So they zoom in on one particular task, and so it's a term that we call unbundling. So they're taking a whole bundle of regulation and they're unbundling it, and it makes them very competitive because they can then say or sell it to different market players, and so that's really made things grow quite fast. So why is this important? This is important because, like I said earlier on, when we don't monitor things, people tend to do bad things, or when things aren't monitored, people take advantage of the system. And so it's quite important that RegTech is implemented. So, for instance, in the know your customers space, if you're onboarding customers in your application, you need to know what type of person they are. Are they politically exposed people? Do they pose a risk to your organization? You don't want to get into business with basically somebody who's doing something that they shouldn't be doing. So ultimately, before you onboard a customer, you need to really know who they are and try and find out all the relationships have or that their businesses have to be able to find out what sort of person they are. Because if you don't, we move on to the next point, which is anti-money laundering. So if you don't know your customer up front, there's a slight chance that the customer might be placing money in your organization for things that they I just got a pop-up message that said speak louder. So I'm just Right. Okay. Sorry. Slight distraction. So you want to prevent people from laundering money. So the placement of money, which basically means that people money that they've gained from criminal activities and try and put them in financial services. The layering of money, so they want to disguise that money by saying, okay, we've placed it somewhere and then as a deposit, and then we're going to change that deposit into some sort of financial instrument. I don't know, like a bond, so that they can hide the source of that income, and then they move it around so that they can reintegrate it into the economy. So it's important that systems are built to detect these sorts of financial transactions, because if they don't, then these money or this money can be put into the economy and used for things that they really shouldn't be doing, which then moves on to the next point of financing terrorism. Now, when someone's been able to place their money from criminal activities into the financial services, they're able to do things like finance terrorism. And that's why in areas in the world where we would say, for instance, in the country where I'm from, we say, you know, we like life, we don't blow ourselves up, we don't do things like terrorism. Well, hey, in any economy where there's money from crime or there's corruption, you will have things like terrorism happen. And unfortunately, that seems to be happening in the region where I'm from at the moment. So having software that can deal with KYC and anti-money laundering will ultimately detect terrorism financing. And the last point, which is human trafficking, which is one that's quite close to me, is it's pretty staggering how much money is made from human trafficking. I think it's about $150 billion is made from human trafficking on a yearly basis. That is a staggering amount of money. One human in the USA, one human being is sold for 7,000 US dollars. That's pretty staggering. And this is the sort of thing that if we have the right things in place and we have the right software in place, we can avoid that. You know, I can't even what anyone would, or start to imagine how anyone would go through something as terrible as human trafficking. And that's why basically why RegTech is important, to stop these things ultimately. Okay, so this slide I call the $1 billion slide. So this zooms in on the importance of cost, why it's really important. So since the crash or the financial crash in 2008, there have been 300 billion US dollars of fines from financial firms or from firms globally. Now that is a lot of money, right? And on a yearly basis, companies are spending 70 billion US dollars to fund their compliance. So they're spending $70 to make sure that they're compliant. That is a lot. Hello. Sorry, guys. I think I lost connection there. Can you hear me now? Right, great. Thanks. So yes, back to the $1 billion slide. 300 billion in fines from firms, a staggering number. 70 billion to fund compliance annually. and it's expected to rise to 118 billion by 2020. That bothers me, to think that an extra $50 billion will be spent in the next 2 years. Yes, those are global statistics. So imagine if that $40 billion was spent on addressing poverty. That's what I'd rather that money was built, was used for, rather than building software to deal with these issues. And the reason we're spending this money is because we keep firefighting, because every time we write software, we're not writing software that's actually dealing with the problem up front. So, you know, I think that, you know, if people can change their mindsets on how they invent or they write software, it would make a huge difference. Second. Okay, so what are the benefits of RegTech software? It ultimately reduces costs, because basically, although there's the upfront cost of actually building software, once it's in there, there's you're not firefighting, so you're not trying to adapt your systems to deal with issues, because you've written your software to deal with the issues up front. And so in the long run, it does reduce costs for your company. It improves efficiency. Why do I say it improves efficiency? Is anyone on here in compliance by any chance? If anyone is in compliance, just say yes. I've been into compliance offices, and they have stacks and stacks of papers under their desks, on top of their desks, everywhere. And in this day and age, or in this digital age, this is not something that we should be doing, right? Hello, I lost my connection again. So sorry about this. I don't know what's going on. Can you hear me? So yeah. Okay, thanks. Okay. Where was I? Okay, improves efficiency. So in a compliance department, if you can digitize a lot of your work up front, you don't need customers to bring documents into you. You don't need to, you can take documents or ask them to upload them onto your, I don't know, whether it's your web server or your software as a service somewhere, rather than having loads of documents on your desk or on your table or in your office. So if you can digitize things like that, it will improve efficiency. What it will also do is it will reduce operational risk. Now, I don't know about any of you, but you know, sometimes I have a bad day at the office. If I have I have a bad day at home. If I get to the office, you know, I might not be in a good mood. And so if I'm not in a good mood, it might mean that I'm sharp as I need to be. Now, that's a human being, and a human being might miss, say for instance, in anti-money laundering, might miss a transaction that's fraudulent. Now, if this is all digitized and computerized, then it's more efficient, because yeah, software, they have no feelings, right? So they don't, you know, they don't have bad days or good days. They're consistent in what they do. If they do things well, they do it well consistently. If they do it badly, they do it badly consistently. At least you can get some consistency from software. So that reduces operational risk. It also standardizes your approach. Now, we're all software, well, a few of us on here are software developers, and so having a standardized way of doing things, we know that helps. And so ultimately, if you standardize the way that you do your software development and include RegTech, wear a RegTech hat when you are writing your software, and that will mean that things will get standardized within your organization. It means that you then start to reap the benefits as time goes on. Right, what are the attributes of a RegTech software? They're always customizable. They have to be customizable, because if you build software that's not customizable or easily customizable, then it means you're defeating the point of trying to save cost. So you need to write your software in a way that it adapts. Why does it need to adapt? Like I said before, regulatory requirements change. Sometimes monthly, sometimes 6 monthly, they change, and new ones come out every year. So you need to be able to customize your software to deal with those. So you need to be able to